So you just went like this to me.
Yeah.
Why'd you do that?
You live here?
Do you live here? What is your problem?
Because we get a lot of people that walk in.
Man, back your dog up for me. Don't walk up on nobody telling them to leave, bro.
Where do you live?
Where do you live?
I can't tell you where I live.
I can't tell you where I live. What's wrong with you?
You have a blessed day, sir.
I'm calling the cops.
You have a blessed day, sir.
Wait here, boy. Wait here. If you live in this neighborhood, wait.
Yo.
If you live in this
bro,
neighborhood,
don't touch
wait.
me, bro. Don't touch. Yo, who the f is you talking to like that? Don't raise your voice at me like that, boy.
Wait here.
I'm a grown ass man. What is you doing?
This is a protected neighborhood, and you're not supposed to be in here.
Why does there seem to be so much tension between global South immigrant communities and Black Americans in the United States? Despite a shared history of colonialism, prejudice, systemic prejudice, structural prejudice, power and prejudice, and exploitation. Like one of the big topics recently was the ways in which the Egyptians were treated during the World Cup. You have videos of Egyptian fans coming into the stadium juxtaposed with Argentinian fans coming into the same stadium to watch the same match at the same time. And you can see only the Egyptians are being patted down. The Argentinian fans are allowed to go in. They're differentiating by jerseys, of course. And this is indicative of the kinds of the norms that has governed, much of, our existence as global South communities here in the United States. Like, it's blatant right now, right in front of the whole world, right? Like, some people have chosen to ignore it or to forget about it or to act as though it didn't matter or it's not a real thing. But the practices and the things that have been happening, right, is just a reminder. It's just the latest reminder. So when we think about the tensions that exist between global South communities and Black Americans in the United States, we often forget our shared relationship to a common enemy, a common racist, a common anti-Black, a common oppressor and exploitator. So that's the question. Now, I'll highlight a couple of what I think are very important points that makes the argument. And the first one is the different historical relationships to America, to the United States. We enter into this space of America. I'm talking about Black Americans as being here since before America was founded. And the migrants, the people who voluntarily migrate to the United States from global South nations. We have a different historical relationship to America. And this is important because for Black Americans, this is home. Our ancestors built this country. Period. You can't talk about America and all the things that you love about America, all the culture that is, manufactured and promoted across the globe. You can't talk about any of that without centering Black Americans, although they do it all the time. But once you historicize and you peel back the layers and you do the history and do the knowledge, you find out where it comes from. That's just what it is. The other thing is this. Remember, I'm talking about different historical relationships to America. America is our home. Our ancestors built this country. We experienced enslavement. We experienced and lived through and survived enslavement. Reconstruction. If you don't know what Reconstruction is, look up the Reconstruction laws after the Civil War. We survived 100 years of Jim Crow laws and segregation from 1860 roughly to 1960. We survived the racial terror that came with groups like the Ku Klux Klan and a multitude of elected officials, right? Right up until the 1960s, 1970s, when they were blatant about it. They haven't changed in many ways. They're still a lot like they were. It's just they're not as open as they were, 50, 60, 70 years ago. This history affords us a very specific, a very nuanced understanding of America that is very rare and very much specific and in many cases unprecedented by other groups in terms of understanding the U.S. and the people and the groups of people that govern the U.S. historically till now. So we have a different relationship with the United States. On the other hand, most immigrants arguably They arrive post-Immigration Act of 1965. They arrive as a result of the civil rights gains after 1965, which I'll expound on in a little bit. But they arrive voluntarily. Migrants from global South communities, they come here voluntarily. They come seeking opportunity, and they believe in America. They believe in the capacity of America. They buy into the idea of America, the possibility of it, the realities of it, and really, honestly, the reality of America transforming their lives. They buy into it. They give up everything that they've known for decades, for centuries even. Like what their ancestors, they leave all of that behind for something new. So they buy into the version, the idealism of America. And their relationship is understandably different, given this history, given these facts. They come here evaluating, can I succeed here? Can I make it here? Can I change the trajectory of my life and for my future generations? Can I do that? And there's a long track record and a long history that suggests, yes, absolutely. Especially folks from global South countries and nations who are all still trying to pick up the pieces from the devastation of colonization and the ways and the stronghold that Europeans have on their nations still. And it exacerbates and gets worse when the best and the brightest leave and go to the Western countries that are really the root cause of them, of their nations not developing. And these perspectives are not in and of themselves irrational. They just come from different experiences. They come from different realities. For example, I have expat friends who are American, who have left the United States for various other countries across the globe, having been fed up. No different than migrants who come to the United States from global South communities or countries. They come because they're fed up with something or another going on in their countries. Maybe there are human rights violations. Maybe there's just a lack of opportunity. Maybe they feel like there's more freedom and more opportunity in the United States, so they leave their homelands. And there are people from the U.S. who go to those very same countries and defend that because of the frustration that they have with being Black American and having endured what our ancestors had endured, and they just want something different for themselves. So I understand it. What I'm saying is this is a rational perspective. So I'm being balanced here. I'm not picking on migrants or immigrants. Like this is, if your mind isn't nimble enough to understand the point that I'm trying to make, this ain't the conversation for you. This is not the place for you to be. All right. That point leads us to the next point. Saying all that to talk about the civil rights inheritance. And what I mean by that, and the reason why I bring this up is because what I'm suggesting is that many, or actually the majority, if not all, of the immigration opportunities afforded to global South, to communities from global South countries, expanded, if not completely opened up, as a result of civil rights reform, which includes legislative change to immigration law in the 1960s. I'm not saying that Black Americans did this for immigrants out of the kindness and good graces, but so that's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is the expansion as a result of what Black Americans did leading up to the civil rights movement and the laws that changed. As a result, this expanded American democracy in a way, or so much so, that it benefited groups beyond those who led the particular struggles, beyond Black Americans. The ways in which their struggle, the ways in which the Black American struggle in the United States expanded U.S. democracy so much so that it afforded opportunities that didn't exist prior. And that includes the changing of migration or immigration laws to include communities from global South countries who had been excluded by law. And that's important. The Immigration Act of 1965, and there are other legislation that resulted around that period, or, so the Nationalization Act. So these policies, these legislations are the direct result of struggles and fights by Black American leaders, community organizers, activists, etc. So again, we go back to another key point, right? With all that in mind, with the civil rights, inheritance, and as it relates to the different historical relationship to America, now we talk about the different incentives between Black Americans, between the Black Americans and between the global South community members who come from global South countries. Many immigrants arrive having invested everything, right? They've like, for them, failure is not an option. They don't come to the United States. They come to the United States with tunnel vision. They come here because they know and they expect to succeed and to find success, a success that they, likely can't find in their countries. These incentives are to avoid conflict. These incentives include seeking acceptance, pursuing stability, emphasizing, right, what is going to take to advance. And one of the things that's not often discussed in these incentives are the ways in which America deals with Black Americans. So how much of these incentives to avoid conflict, how much of that is inherently attached to the fact that you might want to stay away from Black Americans? How much of the seeking acceptance is, okay, and acceptance by who? The people who wield the power in the U.S., right? If we want their acceptance, we need to probably be mindful of the things that they deem acceptable and even mimic some of their patterns and their ways.
This chilling scene caught on camera in downtown Chicago.
You're kidding me.
You see what clearly looks like a cross engulfed in flames. Chicago police releasing this image of a person they say was seen fleeing the scene as the FBI confirms it's investigating. A burning cross is a hate symbol historically used by groups like the KKK and has been prosecuted as a federal hate crime.
How did you land on a burning cross?
It came up to my head one day. I wanted to find something that I could do by myself. I did know about this historical relevance beforehand, but I didn't know the severity.
If we want to pursue stability and if we want to find stability here, the Black Americans are an obstacle. Maybe we should stay away from them. And, quite frankly, whether it's intentionally, whether it's articulated or intentional or not, the result is often the same. Black Americans often approach institutions differently. We have a different approach to the U.S. because we have a much longer historical relationship to this country. We have a deeper base of knowledge and understanding. And many of these incentives, our ancestors shared them in the post-enslavement period. We built communities. We sought to avoid conflict. We sought to seek acceptance from them. We pursued stability. We invented stability. Like, we created stable communities and stable neighborhoods and helped to build cities across this country. We advanced. We had all of that destroyed, so we went through all of these things that migrant groups from global South communities come here doing. Whatever they're doing, it's not new to us. Our ancestors did a version of it. It's all documented. And a lot of times they don't know. They don't know. And why would they? Why would you? How could you? When there's a war in the US on education and teaching US history. So it's not a slight in many respects that people don't know. But, we all do have a responsibility to learn about what's going on around us. The next point, the role of racial hierarchy. With all of these incentives and all of these mechanisms to reach these incentives, we have to talk about the racial hierarchy that is governing many members of the Global South in terms of trying to make the most of their experiment or the experiment that is their relocation to the United States. We have to talk about the racial hierarchy that's at play here. American racial hierarchies create incentives for groups to distance themselves from Black Americans because proximity to Blackness has historically been stigmatized, and proximity to whiteness and mimicking whiteness has always been rewarded. This is one of the missing components of this conversation. It's a difficult thing for some people to swallow, but it is what it is. That claim is supported by scholarship on race, like race scholarship, assimilation scholarship, racial positioning. This is I'm not making this up. I mean, you can just do a random Google search on this, and I'm sure you'll get millions of hits. One thing that I'll ask is that, quiz your Global South friends and ask them, what have they been told about Black Americans? Because I've done it. I've talked to my friends who are from, various other places in the world. I'm like, before you came to the U.S. or when you got here, what did you hear about Black Americans? What did you hear? And if they're honest and if you're real and if you're close friends and they respect you enough, a lot of them will tell you if they know what's up, they'll tell you this, maybe shyly, maybe they'll admit it and they'll be shy about it, but many of them will admit it. They'll tell you, we were told to stay away from you. And I'll tell them, I say, you know what they told us about you? They told us the same thing about you. They told us all of these things, these negative things about you, about, things that's going on in Africa. And, they told us all of these things about you. They did the same thing to us. They did the same thing that they did to you about us. There's a lesson in that. So we need to understand the role of racial hierarchy. And then that brings me to the next point. And this is a very important point because it deals with nuance. And this point is about internal diversity, the nuances between African immigrants. There were over 50 countries on the continent, over 50 countries, African countries. Africa is not a monolith. And all of those, and across those 52 or 54 countries, however many it is, the plus 50 countries in Africa, right? You have multiple languages in one country, multiple cultural differences and nuances, multiple tribal identities and realities informing groups. I'm just talking about it within one country, right? So now you multiply that by 50. So there are these internal differences amongst African groups, amongst Caribbean groups, amongst Latino groups, the same. None of these groups are monolithic, and neither are Black Americans. There are significant differences between these members across all of these communities, and that's important. So what I'm not saying is that all migrants to come to the U.S. have a hostile relationship with Black Americans. And I'm not saying that there aren't some Black Americans who should be looked at suspiciously and who should be loathed. For example, you had the Black woman who raised her hand in the UN multiple times as it related to, the genocide in Palestine. That was a stink. That hurt a lot of us. We were hurt by that. Because I know, people would look at that and be like, how can a Black American, after all that they've been through, how can one of you behave like that? That brings me to my next point. Where does this conflict come from? Well, a lot of it, is because there are different understandings of what racism means. People have different understandings of racism. People have a very elementary, sugar-coated, watered-down understanding of racism. People mix up racism with prejudice. Racism and prejudice are not the same. Racism is about power. Racism is about structures. Racism is the ability to influence groups of people, communities, even nations based on a prejudice or a bias that you have. That's racism. Prejudice is simply, not to, sort of diminish it, but prejudice is sort of like the desire to not want to engage with certain groups of people. So a Latino could hate or not like a Native American, or a Native American can have a problem with a black person, or a black person can have a problem with an Asian person. Like, be prejudiced towards these groups. But that's not racism. That's just prejudice. Like, when your prejudice allows you to shape the life trajectory of people, economically, politically, socially, etc., educationally, when your prejudice is able to shape groups of people and nations and cities, etc., communities, that's racism. That's power. And most black people don't wield that kind of power. By and large, especially in this country, the racists, the people who wield the power that can change the trajectory of people in their lives, in this country, that power is in the hands of white folks, historically. Now, there are black folks who sit in those positions and in those seats of power and mimic those systems and keep the machine going. So, in other words, you do have migrants who sit in the seat of power. You do have even black folks, like I just gave the example of the black woman who raised her hand at the UN. You do have black folks who sit in the seat of racialized power, of white supremacy, white supremacist institutions who keep the machine going. That's one of the most dangerous things that we have going right now, is that there are so many people of color, so many black folks, so many Asian folks, so many Africans, so many who are willing to uphold white supremacy and to uphold racism, racist institutions, and racist policies, and to do racist things that help to destroy their own countries and communities and people. We don't see that reflected in popular culture. We don't see it reflected in media narratives. We see white America as the saviors, the bastions of democracy. We see this, and this image is sent out to the world wholesale. And people from other countries buy into this. They think, they believe in Superman. They believe that, Superman is this white dude. They believe in the goodness of white folk. They're not reminded of the wars that have been started, or the colonization and the genocide and the grape and the mass grapes and things like that have ensued as a result of colonization and the land grabs and the pillaging and the theft of resources that continues right up till now. This is not packaged and sent across the world wholesale for other folks to grapple with. Something completely contrary is sent out through media narratives and depictions. And so what remains is a lack of knowledge, a true lack, or a lack of true knowledge about who the groups and who the actors in the country really are, which makes it easier when people come from global South communities and countries with a very narrow worldview of, I have to make this work. So it's easy for them to buy into, all of the things that America sells it from abroad, from afar. The questions that Black Americans ask is this, as it relates to all of this. Why do so many groups who have themselves experienced colonialism, discrimination, or oppression sometimes distance themselves from us as Black Americans once they arrive in the United States? How don't you see the similarities between us? How is it you take the side of the groups of people who are almost in many cases directly responsible for the reason why you left your homeland in the first place, through the colonial constructs that they left behind at the end of colonization, which allows for the maintenance of pillaging resources from your lands and the maintaining of destabilizing your nations. How do you not see yourself more aligned with us and more aligned with them? How is that? Is one of the questions that a lot of us ask, or at least the question that I'm asking. It's something worth exploring. The challenge, though, is this. If systems of inequality benefit when marginalized communities distrust one another, then really the most important question is not, why do immigrants hate Black Americans? That's an oversimplification. That's not what this is about. The real question is this: what incentives, histories, misunderstandings keep us from recognizing our shared interests? That is, to me, the root of the racial divide, or the real divide between Black Americans and Global South migrants. And if you like this content, like, subscribe, share it with your friends, comment, do all the things, right? That way we know that, this content is reaching folks, and we know to, continue to publish as much and as often as possible. That's it for now, y'all. Peace.
Word up, quick to set it, don't wet it. Real niggas lick shots, peace, Connecticut.
Yo, what up, yo? Time is running out. It's for real, though. Let's connect politics, ditto.